Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Please hype me on YouTube. Thanks. I never believed blood could be the most dangerous bond. Even now, when I close my eyes and try to sleep, I smell the cold hallway of that house. Stale detergent, old wood, and the faint metallic scent of my father's rules sinking into the walls. I'm Ariana Cole, and I swore I would never return to 1190 Willow Creek Drive. But last winter I did, and whatever part of me walked in through that front door is not the same part that walked out. When Mom called me that night, her voice was barely a voice at all, just breath, shaking words, and a whimper of, "Please come home before he ruins everything." I remember staring out my apartment window in Milwaukee, watching snow smear the glass, thinking I must have misheard her. It had been 3 years. 3 years since I packed my bags and told myself I would never again live under his watch, under those rules, under that roof. But guilt is a powerful leash. I left before sunrise, drove 5 hours through a whiteout, and by the time I pulled into the neighborhood, Willow Creek felt like a throat closing around me. The house was smaller than I remembered, its windows shadowed, its porch light dead. I carried my old duffel up the walk, crunching through ice. Mom opened the door before I knocked. Her eyes were swollen, her hair thinner, and when she hugged me, her arms trembled like she'd been holding herself up for too long. "Don't fight with him," she whispered into my coat. "Just don't make him angry this time." The words crawled under my skin. Dad didn't hug me. He didn't ask how I'd been. He just stood in the kitchen, his jaw tight, his fingers drumming once against the table before he muttered, "House rules haven't changed." I laughed because I thought he meant it as a bitter joke. He didn't laugh back. The first night, I barely slept. The heat clanked through the vents. The house groaned like it remembered me, like it was warning me. At 2:17 a.m., I heard footsteps stop outside my bedroom door. Not moving, not knocking, just listening. I held my breath until they went away. That was when I first noticed the lock on the outside of my door. Rusted, old, but real. A padlock ring screwed into the frame. I stared at it until sunrise, telling myself it must be leftover from childhood punishments, that Mom just never removed it, that I was being dramatic, paranoid, ridiculous. Morning proved me wrong. Mom made eggs. Dad sat at the head of the table, reading a newspaper like it was 1989. When I got up to answer a text from a friend, he snapped the paper once and said without looking at me, "No phones at the table. You know the rule." My fingers froze around the phone. Before I could speak, Mom whispered, "Just put it away, honey. Rule number 1, no phones at meals. Rule number 2, no closed doors. Rule number 3, no leaving without permission. Rule number 4, family problems stay in the family. Rule number 5, obey your father." I used to think those rules were normal. Every kid thinks their childhood is the default setting until they step outside it. I knew better now. And yet here I was, sliding my phone into my pocket to avoid a war, swallowing my anger with lukewarm eggs. The house tightened around me over the next 48 hours. My bedroom door always left open, my bathroom time, timed. My shoes moved from the mudroom to the top of the closet, as if I might try to run. Dad didn't have to say the rules out loud. He breathed them. He watched my posture, my tone, even how long I chewed my food. One wrong move and the temperature in the room dropped. But Mom was worse. She followed him. Not physically, emotionally. Her spine bent around his moods. She apologized for him before he even got angry. She apologized to me for things he did, which is somehow more damaging than the cruelty itself. On the second night, as she and I dried dishes, she leaned close and whispered, "If you don't resist him, we'll be fine. Please, Ariana, don't escalate things." escalate. Like standing up for myself was violence. That night the power flickered. Dad's footsteps moved through the hall again. Slow. Heavy. Counting boards. I pretended to sleep, but my pulse hammered through the pillow. When his shadow stopped at my doorway, I kept my breathing steady, eyes closed, terrified he might come in, even more terrified he might lock me in. He stood there for a long time. Then he whispered something I will never forget. "You're home now. No more running." The next morning I tried to leave. Nothing dramatic, I just put on a coat and said I needed air. Dad blocked the door with his arm, not violently, just absolute. "You leave when the family is in order," he said. I laughed weakly. "It's a walk, Dad. I'm not disappearing." His smile was thin and wrong. "You ran before. You'll run again. You don't get to leave until you're fixed." Fixed. Like I was a broken appliance he still owned. By day 4, the house felt smaller. The windows were locked. The basement door, which I'd forgotten existed, was bolted shut with a steel latch I had never seen as a child. At dinner, Dad asked me to recite the rules. When I refused, he tilted his head and said, almost cheerfully, "Let's not make your mother cry tonight." Mom's eyes filled instantly, like a reflex. That night, at 3:12 a.m., the walls woke up. Voices, hissing. My name layered into arguments. I crept to the staircase and saw Mom and Dad in the hallway below, backlit by a flashlight during the blackout. Mom, "She's not a child anymore." Dad, "She acts like one." Mom, "Please, just give her time." Dad, "No. She stays until she learns. I will not lose control again." Mom, "She'll run if you push." Dad, "Not this time." The flashlight beam slid across the wall. An instinct dragged me back up the stairs before it reached me. I didn't sleep. I counted my breaths until dawn. The next day, Dad took my phone. Mom didn't stop him. "No outside contact until we finish this," he said. Finish what? That evening, the blackout deepened. The house sank into darkness, silent except for wind clawing the siding. I sat on my bed, shoes hidden under my pillow, pulse in my throat. When I heard Dad's footsteps coming toward my room, slow and certain, something in me snapped. I didn't think. I just moved. The window groaned as I forced it open. Cold air knifed my face. His fist hit my bedroom door. "Ariana, open it, now." I swung my legs out and jumped. The snow ate my scream. Pain shot up my ankle, but adrenaline swallowed it. I ran barefoot across the yard, slipping, gasping, my breath turning to ice in my throat. Behind me, his voice tore through the night. "Get back in this house." I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I didn't feel the cold. I just ran until a passing plow truck nearly hit me, the driver slamming brakes, eyes wide, yelling, "Jesus, are you okay?" I told him to drive. I didn't care where. Anywhere that wasn't Willow Creek. I never went back. Not for clothes, not for closure. Not even for Mom's funeral 2 months later. People love to ask why I didn't save her. Why I didn't call the police that night. Why I left her there. I don't answer anymore. It doesn't matter what they think. They didn't grow up under his rules. They don't know what that house does to you. They don't know how control can replace oxygen. I live states away now. New city, new locks, new life. But some nights, when the wind hits my windows just right, I wake up choking on the old house air. And sometimes, this is the part I never say out loud, I swear I hear 3 slow footsteps outside my bedroom door, stopping, listening, waiting to see if I still remember the rules. Because the rules never left me, and I don't think he did either. I used to think strict parents were just protective until I learned what control really looks like. My name is Lena Rowe. I'm 24, and 6 years ago, I ran as far as I could from the house at 421 Hemlock Lane, a place where love was measured in obedience, where cameras watched more than eyes did. where punishment rang louder than prayers. I swore I'd never go back. But guilt is a chain with a long reach, and when my parents called to say my little brother Evan was acting out and losing his way, I made the mistake of believing they wanted help, not a witness. The sky bled rain the entire drive to Salem. Water streaked across my windshield like claws dragging down glass. I remember turning onto Hemlock Lane and feeling my breathing shift, the same way it used to when I was 16, sitting in the back seat after report cards, praying the garage door would open slowly so I could memorize one more clean breath before stepping inside. When the house finally came into view, it looked wrong. Not abandoned, not decayed, just darker, as if the clouds above it chose not to move, like they belonged to it. Inside, time hadn't passed at all. The foyer still smelled like disinfectant and lemon. Dad still kept his shoes aligned on the mat like soldiers. Mom still displayed her chore charts on the fridge, laminated and color-coded. But the worst thing, the thing that made my stomach pull tight, were the cameras, small black domes in every corner, blinking red, blinking awake, blinking aware, watching me, watching everything. Mom hugged me with that soft, suffocating smile she always wore. "Sweet Lena," she whispered into my hair. "Home again at last. Let's try to do things right this time." Dad didn't hug me. He never did. He just looked me over like I was a product with scratches he planned to buff out. "Posture," he said. First word, first demand. Not even a hello. And then I saw Evan. He stood near the hallway, shoulders caved in, eyes down, his voice swallowed before he could even offer a greeting. A bruise darkened beneath his left eye, shaped almost like a fingerprint. When I stepped toward him, Mom's hand closed around my wrist. Gentle, but steel. "Dinner first," she said. Questions later. At the table, they made me recite the house rules, like I was still a child, like time had paused and I'd simply stepped back into my old slot on their chessboard. Dad sat tall, fingers steepled, eyes narrowing with every hesitation in my voice. Mom corrected me after each line. "No locked doors ever. No secrets ever. No privacy, ever. No speaking unless spoken to after 9 p.m. No questioning consequences." My throat felt tight, but I repeated them. Because the quickest way to survive in that house was to agree first, breathe later. Evan kept his eyes on his plate. Not once did he look at me. Not once did he lift his chin. His silence was scarier than their words. Before the meal ended, Dad asked, "Do you accept your responsibilities here?" His voice carried the same rhythm as always, calm, measured, empty of doubt. I murmured, "Yes," because saying anything else would have awakened the monster behind his stare. That night, in the bedroom that used to be mine, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the single blinking camera in the corner above the closet. Its steady red light reflected on the window glass like a tiny, unblinking demon eye. I whispered, "You don't own me anymore, but silence eats whispers in that house." And it ate me a little too. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. A shadow broke the line of light under my door. A moment later, a folded paper slid through the gap. My heart thudded as I crept forward, unfolding it slowly. Evan's messy handwriting filled the page. "Don't sleep. They're planning something." My hands went cold. My first thought wasn't "no way." It was already? Because deep down I had known from the second I crossed the threshold that this wasn't a visit. It was a trap. I tried opening my door, but the knob didn't turn, locked from the outside. My breath trembled, panic thudding against my ribs. I tapped once on the door, an old signal between us from childhood. 3 soft taps answered. "Evan," I whispered. "What are they doing?" He whispered back, "They want to fix us." Fix. That word took me back to being 14, kneeling on rice in the living room, while Dad lectured about reshaping character. Back to Mom washing my mouth with soap for rebellious tones. Back to cameras, to checklists, to silence, to scripts, to rules. Always rules. I barely slept. Maybe I drifted for minutes, maybe seconds. But sometime deep into the night, a hand clamped over my mouth. I jolted awake, muffled against a thick palm, wrists yanked and bound before my eyes could even adjust. I thrashed, but a whisper cut through the dark. Shh. Obedience first, then peace. Dad. His breath smelled of mint tea and madness. I tried to scream. Rope bit into my skin. My ankles were tied, arms pinned. Mom's silhouette hovered near the doorway, her voice calm and warm, like she was reading bedtime stories again. You lost your way, Lena. You ran from structure. But you're home now, and we're going to cure the flaw in you once and for all. They carried me to the living room. The house was quiet, except for rain tapping the windows like fingertips. The fireplace glowed low. The cameras blinked red, recording it all. I was tied to a chair, rope around my torso, wrists, legs, chest. Dad knelt beside the fireplace poker, sliding it into the embers, and whispered, "Pain is a teacher. You forgot your lessons. We'll remind you." Mom brushed my hair back with the same tenderness she once used to braid it for school. "Consequences," she murmured. "Make good children." I stared at Evan, who stood frozen near the wall, horror in his eyes, breathing fast, shaking. "Mom, please," he choked. "Please don't. She just came back. She's trying." Dad didn't look at him. Obedience begins with suffering. You know this. The poker glowed orange, and in that moment something inside me broke, not with fear, but clarity. There was no misunderstanding, no exaggeration, no overreaction. I had returned to wolves wearing wedding bands, parents who believed they owned our bodies, our minds, our futures, our voices. Dad lifted the poker, and Evan moved. Knife flashing, rope snapping, breath returning, hope igniting. But hope is loud, and monsters wake fast. Dad lunged, roaring my name like a war command. The poker swung wide, heat slicing the air as Evan sawed frantically at the ropes. "Faster, faster," I whispered, chest heaving. Mom rushed toward him, nails clawing his arms, shrieking, "You ungrateful little—" He shoved her back with a strength I didn't know he had. The rope on my right wrist snapped. I tore my arm free and grabbed the nearest thing, a brass candle holder from the side table, and hurled it at the camera above the mantel. Glass shattered, sparks spat, the room stuttered in shadow. For the first time in that house, a corner was unwatched. Dad swung again. Evan shielded me, taking the strike to his shoulder, collapsing with a howl. The smell of burnt fabric and skin singed the room. I screamed his name and rammed my freed elbow into Dad's ribs. He staggered. Evan's knife sawed through the last rope. I jumped up, grabbed him by the arm, and pulled him toward the back door. "Move!" I yelled. We sprinted down the hall, socks sliding on polished floorboards. Behind us, Dad's voice thundered. Calm gone, mask gone, God complex shattered. "You belong to us. Come back here." Mom's sobs twisted into feral screams as footsteps pounded after us. The back door was padlocked. Of course it was. I yanked Evan toward the kitchen. He clutched his shoulder, breathing ragged, face pale. The house alarms were off. Because why alarm a prison you already control? I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife in reach and slashed at the screen door latch until it ripped loose. We burst into the rain, cold hitting us like a slap. Mud swallowed our footing, but freedom was inches from our souls. Behind us, the door banged open. Dad stood in the frame, rain painting him monstrous. Mom at his side, hair wild, eyes bright with devotion and delusion. "This isn't over," Dad called, voice steady again. Too steady. "We always finish what we start." We ran. Through mud, through trees, through breath that tasted like iron and terror. We didn't stop until the house was swallowed by darkness behind us. Hours later, soaked and shivering, we reached a gas station off the highway. The clerk stared at us, wild-eyed, barefoot, bleeding. and asked if we needed a hospital. I said, "No cops, please, just a phone." Because I knew what my parents could do with a badge, with a courtroom, with a lie. They were charming, they were educated, they were convincing, they were experts at looking like victims of ungrateful children. We never went back, we never gave statements. We disappeared. 6 months passed. New names, new apartment, new locks I check 3 times every night. Evan sleeps with a lamp on. Sometimes he wakes up choking on sobs, whispering, "Don't let them find us." I sit beside him until he can breathe again. But I'm not the same either. Some nights, I dream of the blinking red camera lights, of Dad's calm voice, of Mom's hand in my hair. And sometimes I wake to sounds, soft taps in the hallway, like footsteps pacing outside our door. I know it's my imagination. Probably, maybe, usually. Then yesterday a package arrived. No return label, no stamp, just left at our door. Inside was a laminated chore chart, color-coded, and a note. "Children don't raise themselves. See you soon." The paper smelled like lemon. And suddenly I knew. Rain clouds don't leave houses like that. They follow, they wait, they watch. And one night, when the cameras blink awake again, I'll hear my father's voice in the dark, finishing the lesson he started. Obedience. Until the end. I used to believe my father saved lives. That was the lie that tucked me in at night, the story I clung to like a blanket whenever the house groaned or the wind rattled the shutters of our quiet Newton home. I used to picture him as a hero in a white coat, moving through gleaming hallways with the calm certainty of someone chosen. My name is Riley Armitage, and I was 15 when I first learned what lived beneath our house was not a laboratory of hope, but a mausoleum of experiments, each one carved into the bodies of the people I loved. The basement door always had 3 locks. Dad said it was because his work was delicate and needed to be protected from dust, drafts, and curiosity. I believed him. Mom pretended to. My little brother Caleb never questioned anything. He worshipped Dad, tried to imitate his handwriting, even lined his toys in perfect rows like samples. We were a family built on rituals we didn't understand and rules we weren't allowed to break. Dinner at 7, silence if Dad was processing, lights out by 10, and never, ever open the basement door. But the night Caleb had his first seizure, something inside me snapped. The polished family portrait we presented to the world cracked, just enough for truth to seep through. He was 8. We were watching a storm from the upstairs hallway window, and he started saying his head felt like it was buzzing, like bees were trapped behind his eyes. Then he dropped. His whole body convulsed on the hardwood floor while I screamed for Mom. She ran to him, crying, grabbing his shoulders, but Dad just watched, with this thin, hungry focus I'd never seen before. When it ended, and Caleb lay limp and dazed against Mom's chest, Dad knelt beside him and whispered, "Good. Data begins." That was the first time I felt cold around my father. After that, Caleb changed. Forgetful, dizzy. His hands trembled so often he started hiding them in his pockets. Dad brushed off our terror with a tone that made questioning feel ridiculous. Advances require discomfort. Breakthroughs demand sacrifice. He said it like a quote from scripture. Mom tried once, only once, to confront him, and the bruise that bloomed under her left eye stayed purple for a week, green for another, yellow after that. She told neighbors she slipped on ice, but I heard the truth through the bedroom wall, a thud, a choked sob, and Dad's voice murmuring, "Don't interfere again." From then on, she moved through the house like she was made of smoke. The injection started for me when I turned 13. "Just vitamins," he said, "for cognitive enhancement." I didn't protest at first, not until the vitamins burned under my skin, not until the room began to tilt after each dose, not until I woke up strapped to a padded gurney in the basement, Wrists bruised, mouth dry, Dad leaning over me with a clipboard, murmuring about response patterns and hormonal thresholds. He said words like prototype and control variable and self-correcting evolution. I didn't know what they meant, only that I no longer felt like a daughter. I felt like a project. Mom would slip me notes under my bedroom door, shaking handwriting, torn pieces of grocery receipts or old envelopes. Stay calm, obey for now, we will find a way. But she never ran, never called the police, never grabbed Caleb and me and bolted into the night. Whatever Dad had done to her mind, it held like concrete, years blurred. Dad filed patents, spent nights typing in the basement while machines hummed below us. And Caleb faded. He stuttered, couldn't remember birthdays. Sometimes I caught him staring at the wall, smiling at nothing, eyes glassy. Dad called it progress. I called it erasure. By the time I hit 19, I was planning escape in secret. A burner phone hidden in my mattress, a go bag under loose floorboards, bus schedules memorized. I just needed the right night. But Dad must have sensed it. He always sensed things, like he could read fluctuations in emotion the way other men read weather reports. One night I heard Caleb screaming through the vents, the sound thin and cracking like metal under strain. I ran downstairs before thinking. The basement door was wide open. Caleb was strapped to a steel table, wrists raw, an IV in his arm. Dad hovered over him with a vial of clear fluid and a syringe, eyes bright, muttering to himself. Version 9. Calibration should hold. Hold still, Caleb. This is the breakthrough. Stop. My voice was unrecognizable even to me. Dad glanced up, annoyed, as if I had interrupted a math equation. Caleb gasped my name. Riley, please don't let him, please. His voice broke. Get upstairs, Dad said. You'll thank me when this works. Then he pushed the needle into Caleb's IV. Something inside me tore loose, an instinct older than language. Before I could think, I grabbed the overhead lamp, yanked it down and smashed it against the metal restraints, shattering glass everywhere. Dad roared and lunged, but I sliced the straps free and pulled Caleb up. He fell into me, sobbing, shaking so violently I could barely hold him. We ran. Dad's footsteps pounded behind us. When he grabbed me from behind, I slammed the basement door with every ounce of strength I had. It crushed his hand in the frame. The sound, bones cracking, still echoes in my skull when I close my eyes. Dad dropped, screaming, and I locked all 3 bolts while Caleb collapsed in the hallway. We ran into the street, barefoot and blood-specked, screaming for help until neighbors burst out of their houses and someone called 911. Sirens, flashing red, officers, handcuffs. For the first time in my life, I saw my father afraid, not of the police, but of failure. They dragged him away, yelling formulas, ranting about destiny and evolution and how we had ruined perfection. Caleb and I were wrapped in blankets. Mom just stood on the porch, arms hanging at her sides, like she didn't know which world she belonged to anymore. People think handcuffs end a nightmare. They don't. Dad is in prison now. Caleb barely speaks, and last week, a package arrived. No return label. Inside were pages and pages of Dad's formulas, handwritten, and a single note in that sharp surgical script burned into my memory. Version 10 will be perfect. Don't fail me again. I didn't tell Caleb about the package. He startles easily now. Shadows, loud footsteps, the beep of microwaves, the smell of rubbing alcohol. We live in a small rented apartment on the edge of town, close to the river. I take online classes. He stays home. 1 therapy session a week, though he rarely talks. Some nights he doesn't sleep at all. Other nights he wakes up screaming, clawing at his own arms, whispering, "Get it out, get it out, get it out." I sit beside him until morning. The first page of Dad's formulas sits in my desk drawer. I want to burn it, shred it, drown it. But I don't. I keep it because a part of me needs to understand what he did to us, whether it can be undone, whether Caleb can be whole again. But there's another part, darker. that wonders if the notes were meant not just to taunt but to trigger something unfinished inside me. Because lately I feel different. It started small, a ringing in my ears, a metallic taste in the back of my throat. Then came the dreams. Bright clinical lights, needles. My father's voice whispering numbers I remember upon waking: 8.3, 19.6, 0.72. I don't know what they mean, but when I look at the formulas, patterns jump out at me. Patterns I shouldn't be able to recognize. As if something he injected all those years ago is still evolving inside me, sharpening parts of my mind I don't want sharpened. 2 nights ago, I heard footsteps outside our door at 3 a.m. Slow, measured. Not a neighbor, not random. I held my breath and watched the shadow under the crack. It paused there for a full minute, then moved on. When I opened the door minutes later, the hallway was empty, but there was a smell lingering. Ethanol, clinical, sterile. Yesterday, the kitchen light flickered. Caleb flinched and covered his ears. I stepped onto a chair to tighten the bulb, and when I touched the glass, I felt a jolt. Not electrical, but familiar. The same static buzz I used to feel in the basement when Dad placed sensors against my temples. I nearly fell. The sensation didn't stop for a full hour. Something is happening to me. This morning I caught Caleb tracing a symbol on the condensation of the bathroom mirror. A looping pattern, repeating, intricate. I grabbed his wrist, too hard. "Where did you see that?" He just stared past me and whispered, "In the walls." I told him to rest, but my hands shook for a long time afterward. I finally opened the rest of Dad's pages. Some were formulas, yes, but others were diagrams. There were 2 main columns labeled C and R, Caleb and Riley. My stomach dropped. I followed the lines, watched them split, recombine, pivot. At the bottom of my column, written in red ink, primary candidate, neural yield, promising. Under Caleb's, secondary viability decreasing, accelerated degradation expected. My hands went numb. All this time I thought Dad hurt us equally. He didn't. Caleb was backup. I was the point. I was the design. Which means I am the one he's still trying to finish. Tonight the air feels wrong. The apartment is too quiet. Caleb fell asleep early, curled on the couch, fingers twitching like they do when the nightmares stir beneath the surface. I sit at the kitchen table with the formulas spread out in front of me, a single lamp burning overhead. The hum of the refrigerator syncs with my pulse. I keep thinking about Dad's last words as they loaded him into the cruiser that night. He didn't scream about his work or his reputation. He screamed, "Riley, don't waste what I gave you." What if version 10 isn't a warning? What if it's a summons? I hear a noise in the hallway. A soft, deliberate scrape. Not footsteps this time. Something slower. Closer. Caleb stirs on the couch, whimpering. The scrape comes again, metal against wood. Closer. I stand, my breath caught in my chest, the pages trembling in my fist. Then, a single knock at the door, not frantic, not random, a patient, rhythmic tap. I step toward it. Caleb jolts awake and whispers, "Don't open it. Please don't open it." But I am already moving. Something pulls me forward, not curiosity, recognition. I press my eye to the peephole. There's no one there, just an empty hallway. I sag against the door and hear a whisper through the wood. A man's voice, calm, precise. "Riley, version 10 begins now." My vision blurs. The metallic taste floods my tongue. Behind me, Caleb starts to sob. I don't turn around. I just stare at the door, breath shallow, heart pounding, knowing with a certainty that chills me to the bone. The experiments never ended. They just changed rooms, and this time I won't be running. I don't know if I'm the victim or the evolution, but I do know this. Dad didn't fail. He's still in my head. And whatever version 10 is, it's already alive inside me. I used to think camping trips were supposed to make families closer. I used to believe the woods made people softer, calmer, more human. But that was before I learned what the dark can do to a mind. My name is Tara Whitfield, and if I close my eyes, I can still smell pine needles, wet bark, and the metallic hint of fear that never really washed off my skin. I can still hear my mother's voice telling me to smile, to obey, to be grateful. I can still hear my father stepping between trees like a shadow with lungs. I used to think monsters waited outside the tent. I was wrong. They were sitting next to me by the campfire, roasting marshmallows and humming church hymns. The last trip started like all the others, before dawn, before breakfast, before logic. My twin brother Logan sat beside me in the truck, staring ahead with that half-there gaze he wore whenever he was bracing himself. Our parents didn't allow talking on travel days. Silence builds discipline, my father always said. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the worn Bible in his lap, like it was a map. My mother sat straight as a board in the passenger seat, reciting verses under her breath, the words dull and practiced, like brushing teeth or folding laundry. I watched the woods swallow the road mile by mile. No gas stations, no cabins, no rangers, no help. By the time we reached Pisgah National Forest, the sun was a pale coin rising through fog. My father parked in a clearing so remote it didn't even deserve a name. Phones, he demanded. Logan and I handed them over. He dropped them into a metal tin and locked it with a tiny brass padlock. No poison on this trip, he muttered. Poison meant everything modern: music, friends, opinions, hope. We unloaded the gear. My parents carried the heavy packs. Logan and I were ordered to gather wood, fill water jugs from the creek, and dig a latrine. It was always like that. Bonding through labor, love through orders, family through fear. When I was little, I believed it was normal. Now at 19, I knew better. But knowing and escaping aren't the same thing. I kept my head down and worked. The rules began immediately. Rule 1, no eating unless we earned it. Rule 2, no speaking unless given permission. Rule 3, no sleeping without proving loyalty. That one always scared me because my father never explained what counted as proof. He changed the meaning every summer, twisting the game to see how far we'd bend. Logan and I exchanged glances when our parents looked away, our silent language sharp as Morse code. Stay calm, stay smart, stay alive. By nightfall, the sky turned black in a way city skies never do. The kind of black that devours edges and depth. The fire cracked, throwing sparks that floated upward like dying fireflies. We sat on logs while our parents faced us. My mother smiled the way a mannequin might, stiff and hollow. My father breathed in deeply, eyes closed, as if the darkness fed him. This world, he said, is drowning in weakness. But we will not drown. We will rise. We will choose the strong and discard the unworthy. His voice was calm. Too calm. Logan shifted beside me. Not enough to be obvious. Just a twitch my mother noticed anyway. Sit still, she hissed. My father continued. Some families get destroyed by disobedience. Some survive. Which will we be? He stared at us like he wanted an answer, but Rule 2 forbade speaking. When we didn't reply, he nodded, almost pleased. Good, you're learning. That night, they made us stand at the tree line while they whispered Bible verses about sacrifice. My stomach growled. My legs shook. Logan's breath turned ragged in the cold. We weren't allowed to look at each other. We weren't allowed to look away. When my mother finally dismissed us, she said, Only the faithful deserve comfort. She gave us each a single cracker for dinner. Back in the tent, Logan lay awake. I could tell by his breathing, uneven and tight. Tara, he whispered. Yeah, this year feels different. I know. He hesitated. I think they're going to make us choose or something worse. I swallowed hard, tasting fear like metal. Sleep, I whispered. We'll figure something out tomorrow. I didn't believe it. He didn't either. The next day was worse. No breakfast, no talking, no rest. We were ordered to run drills, my father's word for endurance training. We climbed hills with weighted packs. We carried logs on our shoulders. We crawled through mud. My mother timed everything with a silver stopwatch, her expression bright and peaceful, like she was timing a picnic game instead of tormenting her kids. That evening, while Logan and I cleaned tin cups by the creek, I heard our parents arguing near the fire. Their voices rose, sharp and brittle. It's time, my father said. This year one of them must be chosen. My mother's voice quivered. But which? The disloyal one. My blood froze. Logan stared at me, eyes wide. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His lips formed a single word, run. I nodded barely. We waited until midnight. The forest was silent except for leaves twitching in the wind. The moon cast just enough light to see the path. We slipped out of the tent, moved barefoot to stay quiet, and began to run. Branches snapped underfoot. My breath burned. Logan stumbled but kept pace. Behind us I heard it, the flare gun. A red burst painted the sky. My mother's voice followed, sing-song and eerie. Children, come back. Only one child deserves to come home. Logan's hand gripped mine. We sprinted deeper, weaving between trees, hearts pounding. For a moment I believed we might outrun them. Then Logan twisted his ankle on a slick root and collapsed with a choked gasp. Tara, go. I'm not leaving you. You have to. No! I dragged him toward a ravine and covered him with fallen branches and leaves. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Tara, I'll come back, I whispered, even though I didn't know if it was true. His hand trembled in mine. Then I ran, not away, but toward the overlooked cliff, my parents' favorite sunrise spot. I hid in the shadows and waited. Branches swayed, footsteps. Then I saw them, silhouettes moving confidently through the dark. My mother held a lantern. My father held the Bible and a hunting knife. Tara, he called, sacrifice is love. They lunged when they spotted movement. I stepped aside. Their momentum carried them forward. For a split second, my father's eyes met mine, surprised, almost proud. Then both bodies vanished over the edge. Their screams faded into the ravine, swallowed by darkness. I stood there shaking, my pulse a siren in my skull. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel relief. I felt empty. At sunrise, I hobbled back to where I'd hidden Logan. He looked pale, exhausted, terrified. They're gone, I said. The words sounded foreign, like I'd borrowed them from someone braver. We huddled together until daylight sharpened the world into something solid. Then we followed the trail mile after mile until we found a ranger station. We lied. We said our parents slipped. We cried in all the right places. The rangers believed us. Why wouldn't they? We were just two scared kids in the woods. They sent search teams, but no bodies were recovered. The ravine was deep and the currents below were fast. Nature is unforgiving, one ranger said. I nodded, but inside I wondered if nature had really claimed them. Or if something darker had. We were sent home to relatives. New beds, new walls, new rules, safe rules. But safety didn't feel safe. It felt thin, like paper I might accidentally tear. At night I lay awake, listening for flares, listening for footsteps, listening for whispers. Logan had nightmares too. He'd jolt awake, gasping, grabbing my wrist like he needed to make sure I was real. In the mornings, we pretended to be fine, but our eyes told the truth. The forest hadn't stayed in the forest. It lived in us weeks past. People whispered. Counselors pried. Relatives tiptoed. None of them understood. They saw victims. They didn't see what we really were. Survivors sharpened into weapons. One evening, while unpacking boxes in my aunt's guest room, I found something tucked inside my jacket pocket. A small copper button. My mother's button. The one she'd sewn on her camping coat. My hands shook. I knew I hadn't put it there. I stared at the window. Outside, the tree line swayed. That night I smelled smoke. Not city smoke. Campfire smoke. The room felt smaller, tighter, like canvas walls closing in. I got up, crossed to the window, and stared out at the dark. A breeze stirred the curtains. Leaves rustled. Then I heard it, a twig snapping. I froze. Breath held. Heart pounding. Nothing moved. I forced myself back to bed, but sleep didn't come. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of flares streaking through a red sky and my parents' voices chanting verses I couldn't unhear. I woke up sweating, nails digging into my palms, days blurred. Logan withdrew. He stopped eating full meals. Stopped talking. He jumped at sounds, even harmless ones. One afternoon, I found him in the basement, sitting on the concrete floor, rocking. They're not gone, he whispered. Yes, they are, I said. He looked at me with hollow eyes. You didn't see what I saw, I swallowed. What did you see? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The fear in his eyes told me enough. That night, the smoke smell returned, stronger. I checked the house. No fire, no stove left on, no candles. But when I looked in the mirror, I caught a glimpse, just a flicker, of shadows behind me, shaped like two figures standing between trees. I spun around. Nothing. My breath shook. My throat tightened. I pressed my palms to the sink and whispered, "They're dead. They're dead. They're dead." But doubt slithered in. Because the thing about growing up in fear is that fear becomes home. Silence sounded like their rules. Darkness felt like their gaze. Even freedom felt like a test. The next week, Logan disappeared. He left a note with 2 words, "Prove loyalty." I knew whose words those were. I knew where he was going, Pisgah. I packed a bag and returned to the forest, alone. By the time I reached the old clearing, night had fallen. The fire pit was cold, but footprints pressed into the soil. Fresh ones? I followed them to the ravine. My pulse thundered. The edge looked different in daylight. In darkness, it looked like a mouth waiting to swallow. "Logan?" I called. Wind answered. Then softly I heard it, humming. My mother's tune. The hymn she sang while stirring stew or cleaning knives. I stepped back, heart in my throat. A flare shot into the sky, red, identical, familiar. My breath shattered. I wasn't alone. Branches shifted behind me. A voice, my father's voice, whispered, "Only one child deserves to come home." I ran. Branches whipped my arms. Roots clawed my ankles. My lungs burned. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel them. Hunting, herding, smiling. Finally, I collapsed by a fallen log, gasping. I pressed my hand to the earth, tried to steady myself. Then I felt something metal beneath my palm. I lifted it, a brass padlock. Our padlock, the one from the phone tin, still locked, still warm. I dropped it and staggered back, shaking my head, whispering, "No, no, no." A twig snapped behind me. I turned. The forest stared back, and I knew, whether my parents lived or Logan had become them, or the woods themselves remembered their rules, it didn't matter. The lesson was alive, and I was still being tested. I ran into the darkness, not sure if I was escaping or returning, knowing only one thing with absolute clarity. Some families never stop hunting their own. I never understood how a home could feel like a debt, or how love could feel like collateral the moment you walked through the front door. I'm Marissa Lane, 26, and returning to 1478 Redwood Street, Dayton, Ohio felt like stepping back into a cage I thought I'd escaped. The house hadn't changed. Same chipped siding, same fogged front window, same rotting porch rail that creaked when the wind gasped through it. But I had changed. Or at least I thought I had, right up until I smelled the stale whiskey drifting through the hallway and felt my stomach tighten like a fist. Some places don't just greet you, they claim you. My father met me in the doorway, arms wide, eyes glossy, a grin stretched too far across his face. "There she is," he boomed, squeezing me so tightly I could barely breathe. His cologne, sharp and cheap, stung my nose. His voice dripped pride, but the grip of his hand said something else. Possession, not affection. My mother lingered behind him, eyes lowered, wringing her fingers like she always did when she was lying to herself. "Things are better now," she whispered. But a fresh hole in the drywall behind her said otherwise. Dinner was silent except for the clatter of my father's fork and the clink of ice in his glass. The tension in that dining room felt like gunpowder dust, fine, invisible, and ready to erupt at the slightest spark. When he finally spoke, his voice was too calm. "You can stay here as long as you like, Pumpkin. We're family. Family takes care of each other." He smiled, but I'd grown up in that house. I knew the difference between kindness and a threat dressed like kindness. My mother barely touched her food. She trembled every time a car passed outside, like she was waiting for one to stop and end the world. On my second night back, I found her crying in the kitchen with the lights off. She tried to blame allergies as if tears could ever smell like fear. "Mom," I whispered, "what's going on?" She glanced toward the living room where my father slept in his recliner, a half-finished bottle on the carpet beside him. "He just needs time," she murmured. "He's trying," I wanted to scream. "Trying?" The man hadn't tried at anything except losing money and breaking bones, walls, furniture, sometimes people. By the third night, I learned the truth. My father had racked up a debt with a man named Derek Cole, and the due date had arrived. I overheard them on the phone. My father pacing the living room, voice slurred but desperate. "I'll make it right. Just give me a week. I have a solution. Collateral. He paused, and in that silence I felt something cold crawl through my ribs. When he said, "My daughter's back in town," I dropped the glass I was holding. It shattered on the tile, but somehow the silence that followed felt louder. When I confronted him the next morning, he only smirked. "Don't be so dramatic," he said, lighting a cigarette. "You got a car, you got clean records, you got nothing to lose. You helped me with one run, one delivery, and we're square. You owe me. After all I've spent raising you, it's the least you can do." The audacity made my head spin. "I don't owe you anything," I snapped. His face changed. His hand shot out and gripped my arm so hard I thought his fingers might snap bone. "You live under my roof," he growled. "So you'll do what I say." My mother tried to intervene. "Please," she whispered, "just do what he asks. It's safer that way." But her voice sounded rehearsed, defeated, like she'd said the same line 1,000 times before. I pulled away and locked myself in my childhood bedroom, shaking, staring at those old high school trophies that suddenly looked like props from someone else's life. I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like footsteps coming for me. The storm hit on the 4th night, rain slamming sideways against the house, wind howling like something alive. That's when Derek arrived. His black truck pulled up without headlights like a predator with patience. I watched from my window as he stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, his jacket flapping violently in the wind. My father ushered him in fast, but not before Derek's eyes lifted and met mine through the glass. That look, cold, assessing, already owning the outcome, made my lungs tighten. They talked for an hour downstairs. Then my father called up to me too casually. "Marissa, come down here." I didn't move. My mother appeared in my doorway a minute later, face pale, tears already on her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, "just cooperate. He won't go away." That was the moment I realized she wasn't afraid of losing him. She was afraid of what he would do if she tried. I went downstairs. Derek looked me over like I was merchandise. "Pretty girl," he muttered, not as a compliment, but an inventory note. "Clean record. No priors, yeah, she'll do." I glared, but he only smiled. "Your daddy here's made some bad choices. You're gonna fix one of them. Tomorrow morning you go where I tell you, drive what I give you, and you don't ask questions." I said nothing. My father filled the silence. "See? She's on board." Derek leaned in close to me. "If you run, if you talk, if you think you're smarter than this, your folks pay the price first. Then you, understand?" I didn't nod. I didn't breathe. When Derek left, my father sighed in relief as though I were a tool he'd just successfully rented out. "It's not a big deal," he insisted, pouring himself another drink. "You drive a car from point A to point B, then it's over." I stared at him, realizing with sick clarity that he didn't see me as a daughter. I was leverage. I was currency. Sleep was impossible. I waited until the house was quiet, my father snoring downstairs and my mother motionless beside him like a ghost. I packed a backpack, cash from an old jewelry box, 3 changes of clothes, my ID, nothing more. I crept down the hallway, careful to avoid the floorboards that squeaked. But when I reached the front door, a voice came from behind me. "You'll never outrun them," my mother whispered. She stood in the shadows, eyes hollow. "Just stay. It's safer if you stay." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the truth I'd refused to face. She wasn't on my side. She never had been. She was broken, loyal to the cycle, loyal to the monster. I opened the door anyway. "I'd rather die trying," I said, and stepped into the storm. I ran through the rain-soaked streets until the house disappeared behind the trees. My car was parked 3 blocks away where I'd left it days earlier. I fumbled with the keys, hands trembling, heart battering my ribs like it wanted out. When the engine finally roared to life, I sped onto the highway with no destination except away. The storm swallowed the road, and every pair of headlights behind me felt like Derek's. I didn't stop driving until sunrise. I reached a motel off I-70, the kind of place where carpets never fully dry and the front desk clerk doesn't ask questions as long as you pay in cash. Room 19 smelled like old smoke and bleach. The curtains were thin. The lock was weaker than my nerves, but it was distance, and distance felt like oxygen. I showered, scrubbed my skin raw, and still felt my father's fingerprints around my arm. By the second day, the paranoia settled in. I jumped at every knock, every footstep outside my door, every car that slowed in the parking lot. I kept telling myself I was safe, but safety felt like a rumor. I stared at my phone for hours, knowing the smart thing was to ditch it, but part of me wanted to see if my mother would call. She didn't. When the phone finally buzzed, it was a text from an unknown number. You can't run forever. I threw the phone in the trash and packed again. The next week blurred into a chain of motels across Indiana, then Illinois, each room more suffocating than the last. Sleep became a stranger. I kept imagining Derek stepping out from behind a vending machine, or my father bursting through a door with that drunken rage in his eyes. I drove only at night, stuck to side roads, lived on gas station coffee and protein bars. I told myself I was surviving, but I wasn't living. I was hiding. One night at a rest stop, I saw a black truck idling under a street lamp. Same build, same color. My blood iced. I got back in the car and peeled out before I could second guess it. Maybe it wasn't Derek, but maybe it was. When fear becomes your compass, every direction feels wrong. By the third week, I reached St. Louis. I thought a big city would swallow me, let me vanish into its noise. I found a basement apartment for rent, paid 2 weeks up front, and told the landlord I didn't need a lease. I bought a cheap flip phone, a second-hand alarm, a wooden bar for the door. I convinced myself this was a new beginning. But trauma doesn't care about geography. The nightmares started, my father pounding on the door, Derek's voice in the dark, my mother whispering, "Just cooperate." I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The apartment walls felt too close, like they were leaning inward. I nailed a blanket over the window because the blinds weren't enough. I memorized every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the pipes, so I'd notice if one sound didn't belong. Then the letters arrived. No name. No return address. Just a plain envelope slid under my door. The first one read, "You still owe us." I froze. I hadn't told a soul where I lived. I burned the letter in the sink, but the next morning another one waited. "You can't hide from a debt." My hands shook as I tore it up. I checked the locks 3 times, then 5, then 10. I stopped sleeping altogether. On the 6th day in that apartment, someone jiggled the handle at 2:13 a.m. Not a knock. Not a mistake. A test. The metal rattled again, harder this time. I held my breath, gripping a kitchen knife with white knuckles, staring at the door like it was a mouth waiting to swallow me. The rattling stopped. Silence swelled. I stood there for an hour, knife raised, waiting for the next sound. It never came, but something in me snapped that night. I couldn't keep running and waiting to be hunted. I needed to disappear completely. By morning, I packed for the last time. I left the key on the counter and walked away from the apartment, from St. Louis, from whatever thin illusion of safety I'd tried to build. I headed south with no plan except movement. Town after town blurred past. I spoke to no one. I avoided cameras. I paid only in cash. I became a ghost. Now I'm in another nameless motel, writing this in a torn notebook I bought at a bus stop. The room smells like mildew. A truck passes every few minutes on the highway outside. I don't know what city I'm in anymore. I don't know where I'm going next. All I know is this: debts don't disappear. And men like my father never gamble just once. Every time a car slows near my window, my breath stops. Every time footsteps pause outside my door, my heart claws at my ribs, begging to escape. I keep the knife on the nightstand. I sleep in my shoes. I don't look in mirrors anymore. They make rooms feel deeper than they are, like someone else is always standing just behind me. Some nights I swear I hear my father's voice outside, slurred and angry. Other nights I hear Derek, calm and certain. I don't know which is worse, the monster I was born to, or the monster he sold me to. If they find me, I won't run again, I'm too tired. But until that door finally bursts open, until those footsteps stop outside my room and don't walk away, I will keep moving, keep breathing, keep waiting for the inevitable, because this is what survival looks like when the enemy isn't a shadow, but a memory wearing a human face. And if this notebook is ever found, if anyone ever reads these words, just know this: I tried, I really tried. I was born into a secret I never agreed to keep, and sometimes I think the walls of that house knew it long before I did. My name is Haley Mercer, and whenever someone asks me where I grew up, I usually lie and say I don't remember. But I do. I remember 913 Alder Ridge Road, the chipped white paint, the iron smell of well water, the taste of dust in the vents, and the quiet way my mother avoided my eyes at breakfast. I used to think she was fragile, Now I know she was broken. When my father called 3 months ago and said she had fallen apart after her so-called episode, I made the mistake of returning. The drive back to Birmingham felt like a descent into something I swore I'd escaped. I told myself I was going there to help her, to be the responsible daughter, to prove I wasn't afraid of him anymore. But the moment I stepped through the front door, I felt that old familiar pressure in my lungs, like the house itself was pressing a hand against my ribs. The lights were dimmer than I remembered, the air heavier. The floorboards still creaked in the hallway outside her room. My father greeted me with a smile that stretched too wide, all teeth and calculation, like a man rehearsing warmth instead of feeling it. "Haley, sweetheart, you're home." His voice was syrupy, thick and strangely soft, like he was playing a part. "Your mother will be so happy to see you. She's resting right now." Resting, that word again. Resting, like a doll placed on a shelf. Resting like a secret you lock in a box when company comes over. I forced a smile and set my suitcase down. "Where is she?" "In the bedroom," he said. "She's delicate right now. The doctor said she needs structure and quiet. You understand?" I didn't reply because I did understand. Too well. And if I spoke too soon, the truth might start leaking out of me before I was ready to face it. That first night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in my old room, surrounded by relics of a girl who never had a childhood. Trophies I never wanted, dresses I never chose, memories I never owned. Around midnight, I heard faint metal sounds down the hall, a soft clink, then another. Rhythmic, unmistakable chains. No restraints, my stomach tightened. I pushed my door open and listened, a voice, low, commanding, my father, another voice, weak, trembling. My mother. I knocked on her door anyway. Silence. When my father opened it a moment later, he filled the frame like a shadow swallowing the light. His eyes were calm. "Too calm, she's sleeping," he murmured. "Don't wake her." I tried to look past him, but he stepped forward, herding me away with casual authority. "Tomorrow," he said. "Let her rest." I nodded and retreated. But I didn't believe him. Morning revealed a version of my mother that was somehow both familiar and foreign. She sat on the edge of the bed in a neatly pressed nightgown, her hands folded in her lap like she wasn't sure she was allowed to move. Her eyes were hollow, her smile thin. "Hi, Mom." She lifted her gaze. "Haley, you came back." There was no hug, no warmth, just a small nod, as if she was checking a box on a list. When I sat beside her, I noticed the faint bruising near her wrists, barely visible beneath the lace of her sleeves. "What happened?" I whispered. She shook her head too quickly. "Don't ask." "It's better if you don't." "Better for who?" I stared at her, searching her face for the woman who used to hum lullabies under her breath, the woman who once slipped me candy when he wasn't looking. But that woman was gone, carved out and replaced by something obedient and afraid. Later that afternoon, I confronted him in the kitchen. The sunlight through the blinds striped the linoleum in harsh yellow bars, and dust floated in the air between us. "She looks terrified," I said. "What are you doing to her?" He didn't flinch. He poured himself coffee. "Your mother is sick. She needs direction. She spiraled without me." "You don't know the whole story." "I know what bruises look like," he smirked. "You think you're strong now? You think you understand control, responsibility, sacrifice?" He sipped his coffee, watching me over the rim of the mug. "I kept this family together. I gave her purpose. Without me, she's nothing. You don't know what women are capable of when they lose structure. Haley, you don't know what chaos looks like." His words slithered into me, cold and familiar, echoing years of manipulation I thought I'd outgrown. I walked away before I said something that would shatter the fragile balance keeping me in that house long enough to get her out. That night, I tried again. After he fell asleep, I crept to her room. The lamp cast a soft orange pool across the blanket, and she stared at the wall like she was waiting for instructions. "Mom, listen to me," I whispered, sitting close. "Pack a bag. I'll drive us out of here before sunrise. We'll go anywhere. You don't have to stay." She recoiled, eyes going wide with terror, not hope. "No, you can't. He'll be angry. Who cares? You don't belong to him." She shook her head violently, gripping my hand with surprising force. "Yes, I do." It wasn't fear in her voice, it was belief. I didn't sleep again. By morning, my nerves felt electrified, my mind running through escape routes and worst-case scenarios. When I came downstairs, my father was waiting at the table, fingers steepled, eyes bright with quiet rage. "You went into her room, it wasn't a question. She's my mother," I snapped. "She's my wife," he corrected softly, dangerously, "and you will not interfere again." We stared at each other for a long, suffocating moment, and in that silence I understood something with chilling clarity. My mother wasn't the only prisoner in that house. He had come for my mind too. Maybe he always had. The breaking point came that evening. I walked past the basement door and heard her crying. Not quietly, not suppressed. Heartbroken, raw, pleading sobs. I grabbed the handle, but it was locked. My pulse hammered in my ears. "Dad!" I shouted, searching the hallway. "Where is the key?" He appeared behind me, calm as ever. She disobeyed. "She needs correction. Are you insane?" "Open it!" "No!" I snapped. I shoved him hard, and he slammed into the wall. For a split second, he looked almost impressed. Then his expression darkened. "You're just like her," he said. "Reckless, ungrateful. You need guidance." He reached for me. I ran. Not away from the house, toward the living room, toward the heavy iron lamp on the table. I grabbed it and swung with everything I had. The crack of metal against bone was louder than I expected. He collapsed motionless, and the silence that followed felt unnatural, thick, like the house itself was holding its breath. My hands shook as I dug through his pockets, found the key and stumbled to the basement door. I didn't know if he was dead. I didn't care. I just needed to get her out. What I found below would haunt me long after I left that house behind. The basement was colder than I remembered, the cement floor stained and damp. And there she was, strapped to a wooden platform, wrists and ankles bound with leather restraints. Eyes closed, face turned toward the ceiling. I rushed to her side, fumbling with the buckles. "Mom, I'm here. You're okay. I'm getting you out." Her eyes fluttered open, but there was no relief in them. No gratitude, only dread. "Haley," she whispered, "you shouldn't have done that. He'll be angry." "He's not waking up," I said. "We have to go now." Her voice was almost a chant. "He'll be angry. He'll be angry. He'll be angry." I froze, my fingers still on the straps, cold spreading through me like ink in water. Before I could respond, I heard movement upstairs. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Alive. I don't remember climbing the basement steps. I only remember the way the doorknob felt in my palm. Slick. Warm, like someone else had just touched it. The house above was silent. Too silent, and every instinct in me screamed to run, to flee barefoot into the dark and never look back. But my mother was still downstairs, and the footsteps I'd heard, they were not imagined. They were measured, intentional. Someone was moving through the house with patience, not panic. I reached the top step and paused, listening. The kitchen floor creaked. A cupboard door clicked shut. Then stillness. "Dad?" I whispered, hating myself for even using the word. No response. I stepped into the hallway, heart thrashing in my chest. My hands trembled, and every shadow looked like it wanted to step forward. The iron lamp was still on the carpet near the wall where I'd struck him. But he was gone. No body, no blood. Not a smear, not a drag mark, nothing. The floor was clean, almost polished. Had I imagined hitting him that hard? Had I imagined him falling? No, I remembered the sound. The weight. The collapse. I pressed a hand to my mouth and fought the rising tide of nausea. I backed away, forcing myself to breathe. I needed a weapon, a phone, a plan. I reached for the landline on the counter, lifted it, and my stomach dropped. The cord was cut clean through. Behind me, a floorboard moaned. I spun, fists clenched. No one stood there. Just the hallway yawning open, dim and endless, like a throat waiting to swallow me. Pictures lined the wall. Family photos, stage smiles, matching outfits. His idea of perfection. My mother always looked smaller in those pictures, her shoulders stiff, her smile too tight, like someone bracing for impact. Something caught my eye. A new photo in the last frame. I stepped closer, dread prickling my skin. It was me, not a childhood picture, a new one. Taken recently. I was standing outside my apartment building in Atlanta, keys in hand, looking down at my phone. The angle was distant, taken from across the street, maybe from a parked car. My stomach turned to ice. He had been watching me. Long before I came home, I reached for the frame, but a voice stopped me cold. "Haley." My mother's voice, but not from the basement. I turned slowly. She stood at the end of the hall, pale and swaying, her nightgown ghosting around her legs. The basement straps were gone. I didn't understand. I had left her bound. I hadn't unbuckled her. How was she standing here? "Mom?" My voice cracked. "How did you?" "You shouldn't run," she whispered. "He doesn't like when we run." Her eyes, God, they were empty. Hollow in a way that didn't look afraid anymore, only resigned. Like a puppet waiting for the next string to be pulled. "Where is he?" I choked out. She blinked slowly, almost tenderly, and pointed behind me. I pivoted, body tense, ready for impact. But no one was there. I backed away step by step, my shoulder brushing the wall. "Mom, listen to me. We have to leave. He can't control you." "Not anymore." She smiled softly, tilting her head. "Sweet girl. Control is love." "Don't you know that yet?" Her words slammed into me like a blow. I shook my head. "No, that's what he taught you. That's what he did to you. But it's not real." She took a step closer, then another. Her voice quieted to a reverent whisper. "He saved me from myself, and now he's going to save you too." I reached for the lamp, for anything. But the hallway light flickered, buzzing, and then I felt it. A presence. Not imagined, not atmospheric, real, behind me. Close enough that the hairs on my neck rose in a shivering wave. A warm breath ghosted my ear. Haley. His voice. Calm. Steady. Whole. I spun and swung the lamp, but he caught my wrist midair. His grip was iron. His smile was patient, like a disappointed teacher. "You hit harder than I expected," he murmured. "I'm proud of that. Shows potential. Let go." I screamed, thrashing. He didn't. He pulled me close, lowering his voice. "You think strength is rebellion, but rebellion is just fear with a mask on. I'll help you shed it." My mother watched from the end of the hall, hands clasped like she was witnessing a baptism. I drove my knee upward, connecting with his ribs. He grunted and loosened his grip just long enough for me to wrench free and bolt for the front door. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I just ran. My bare feet hit the porch. Gravel bit into my soles. I sprinted toward the neighbor's yard, lungs burning, heart battering my ribs. "Help!" I screamed into the night. "Somebody, please!" Porch lights flicked on across the street. A dog barked. A window slid open. I made it to the Harlow's porch and pounded on the door. "Call the police." "Please, hurry!" Mrs. Harlow, robe cinched tight, eyes wide with shock, ushered me inside. She locked the door and grabbed her phone with shaking hands. "Oh my God, Haley, what happened?" I tried to explain, but the words tangled. Basement, restraints, chains, he's still there. She's not herself. He won't stop. "Please hurry!" My thoughts were mud. My breaths too fast, panic blurring everything at the edges. The police arrived in minutes. I watched from the window as they approached my house. Flashlights cutting across the lawn, voices firm, commanding. They kicked in the door. I waited and waited and waited. When they came back out, their faces were unreadable. The older officer asked me to step outside. His tone was cautious, clinical. "Miss Mercer, there's no one in the house," I stared at him. "That's not possible." "No signs of struggle," he continued. "No restraints. No blood, no broken lamp. The basement is empty. The home is undisturbed. Are you sure you're feeling all right tonight?" My voice splintered. He was there. She was there. "You have to look again." He raised a hand. "There was no sign of your father. And as for your mother, according to our records, she passed away 8 months ago." I felt the world tilt, the ground lurching beneath me. "No," I whispered. "I saw her. I touched her. She spoke to me."
She begged me not to anger him."
The officer exchanged a look with his partner. Pity, doubt, restraint. They didn't believe me. No one would. They escorted me to the hospital for evaluation. I stayed overnight. They said shock can cause hallucinations. Trauma can resurrect old memories. Grief can blur the line between real and imagined. I didn't argue. What would be the point? But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know my father is still out there. I left Birmingham the next morning, driving until the highway blurred into one long smear of gray. I changed my number. I moved across state lines. I found a small apartment above a hardware store in Tennessee and tried to build a life out of the fragments that were left. For a while, it worked. But some nights when the wind rattles the windows and the pipes groan in the walls, I wake up gasping, convinced I hear metal restraints clinking in the dark. I check every closet, every lock, every corner. I tell myself it's over. Then last week I found something on my kitchen table when I came home from work. A photograph, me, unlocking my new apartment door. Taken from across the street. No note, no signature, just proof. And last night at 3:12 a.m. someone knocked on my door. Not loud, not frantic, just one soft knock, patient, certain, like a man who always gets to reclaim what belongs to him. I didn't open it. I didn't breathe. I just stood there in the dark, my hand over my mouth, listening. I'm listening still, because I know he's close. And the worst part isn't that he's coming for me. The worst part is that when I close my eyes, I hear my mother's voice behind him, whispering the same words over and over, like a prayer I can't unhear. Control is love. Just give in. I never understood why my father loved the road more than us. The highway stole him, shaped him, and hollowed him into something sharp and watchful. And by the time I was old enough to notice what he really was, it was already too late. I'm Kara Winslow, and if I close my eyes, I can still smell the diesel on his clothes and hear the hiss of air brakes echoing through the dark yard behind our house at 2680 Crawford Mill Road. I used to think that smell meant he was home. Now I know it meant we were trapped again. Dad always said freedom lived on the asphalt, that the world out there was rotten and hungry and would swallow good children if he let us loose. After Mom died, his rules multiplied like mold in a sealed room. No friends, no neighbors, no school. No locks on our bedroom doors. No talking to strangers. Family is the only safe place, he'd whisper, though his voice always sounded like a threat. He'd disappear for weeks, driving shipments across the country. And those were the only days I breathed without listening for footsteps. Then he'd return without warning. His headlights would wash through the curtains, and my little brother Jamie and I would lie frozen, staring at each other's shadows on the walls, knowing the worst part of our lives was about to start again. He'd wake us always. Didn't matter if it was 2 a.m. or 4. He'd line us up in the living room and pace in front of us like a man counting inventory. "Show me your hands," he'd say. "Look at me when I talk to you. Sit up straight. You're mine. I keep you good." The world ruins children who wander. His eyes would skim over us, searching for sins only he could see. Sometimes he'd make us recite those twisted rules he invented. Sometimes he'd just stare, breathing heavy through his nose like he was fighting something inside himself. The worst part was the trailer. When he was home, we didn't get to live in the house. Houses have windows. Windows invite eyes, he'd mutter. So he'd lock us in the old converted trailer out back, the one with bolted shutters and a single rusted padlock on the door. He called it homeschooling, I called it a prison. We had workbooks from some online curriculum he barely read. Mostly he lectured. Lessons about loyalty, purity, obedience, punishments for wandering thoughts. He monitored everything, our expressions, our posture, even our dreams if we talked in our sleep. Jamie used to bite his nails down until they bled from the stress of trying to be exactly what Dad demanded. It got worse last April. Jamie told me one night, whispering under a thin blanket on the trailer floor, that when he turned 18 he was leaving. His voice shook, but there was something fierce in it too. "He can't own us forever," he said. "When I'm 18, he can't stop me. I'll leave. I'll come back for you. I promise." I wanted to believe he could save us. I wanted to believe freedom was that simple. But I'd seen what Dad did when something slipped from his grip. I felt sick just hearing the words. Dad must have sensed it. He always sensed disobedience before it even happened. He started locking Jamie's bedroom at night when we weren't trapped in the trailer. He watched him more closely, touched his shoulder too long, stared at him with that smile that never reached his eyes. I'll never forget the way he said it. "Good children don't run. Good children stay where they belong." I couldn't sleep after that. Every night I waited for the click of Dad's boots on the hallway floorboards, terrified that this time he'd take Jamie somewhere I couldn't follow. Then I found the bus tickets. Jamie hid them in his shoes under the trailer's loose floorboard. 2 tickets. Knoxville to Louisville. Departure at dawn on a Monday 3 weeks away. He had planned everything. "We'll run," he told me, voice trembling. "We'll go before he gets back. We can disappear." I hugged him so hard he winced. It was the first real hope I had tasted in years. But hope is loud, and in a place ruled by fear, loud things get noticed. Dad came home early. Storm clouds were bruising the sky that night. wind slamming the shutters as his truck roared into the yard. Jamie barely had time to shove the board back into place before the air brakes hissed like a snake outside. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would shake the walls. Dad barged in with rain dripping from his beard and lightning reflecting in his eyes. "Both of you, outside, now." His voice was too calm. Calm meant danger. He dragged Jamie toward the truck, fingers digging into his arm. "The world steals good children," he growled. "I'm done letting it try." Jamie screamed my name. I didn't think. I just moved. I ran to the toolbox beside the trailer hitch and grabbed the closest thing with weight. A tire iron slick with rain. I swung, the crack echoed through my bones. Dad staggered, his grip loosening just enough for Jamie to break free. We didn't stop to look. We ran barefoot through the mud, through the ditch, through broken weeds and cold water until we reached the highway. Horns blared. Headlights flashed. Somehow someone stopped. We climbed into a stranger's car, sobbing and shaking and begging. "Please, please drive, please go. Don't look back." I didn't breathe until the truck lights disappeared behind us in the storm. That was 8 months ago. Now we live with a foster family in a small town 2 hours away. People smile here. Neighbors wave. Teachers act like learning is normal, not a test you can fail with your life. I should feel safe, I try to. But safety is a language my body doesn't speak yet. I hear air brakes in my dreams. I smell diesel when there's nothing there. Sometimes at night I sit on the edge of my new bed and stare out the window, waiting for headlights to sweep across the wall. I thought the terror would fade. Trauma has a longer shelf life than I expected. One night last week I woke up certain I heard it. That sharp hiss of compressed air. Too close, too familiar. I rushed to the window. Nothing was there. Just a quiet street and a flickering lamppost and a line of parked cars glittering with dew. I told myself it was a memory, not a warning. But then yesterday on my way home from school, I saw a truck idling at the end of our street. A big blue 18-wheeler, engine running, cabin lights glowing faintly behind tinted glass. My stomach dropped. I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds. Then it pulled away, slow and smooth, like it had been waiting for me to notice, which means one thing: he might have found us. I didn't tell Jamie at first. He's adjusting better than I am, and I don't want to drag him back into my nightmares. He laughs now, makes friends, talks about the future like it's real. I can't take that from him. But the truck, I couldn't ignore it. Over the next few days, I started noticing little things. A mud print near the backyard gate shaped like a heavy boot, a greasy fingerprint on our mailbox, the sound of an engine at night that faded the second I sat up in bed. I told myself it was coincidence, but there's only so much coincidence before it becomes a pattern. On Friday, a package showed up on the porch. No return label, no postage, just my name written in black marker. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single object, a chrome gear shift knob from a semi. I dropped it like it burned. That's when the panic finally broke through the dam in my chest. I locked myself in my room and cried until my throat hurt. I had 3 choices: tell our foster parents, tell Jamie, or tell no one. I chose the worst one. I said nothing. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house felt wrong. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Sometime after midnight I heard gravel crunch in the driveway. I froze, my ears strained so hard it hurt. Then silence. No engine, no footsteps, just the electric hum of the street lamp outside. I crawled to the window and lifted the corner of the curtain. There it was, a dark shape in the road, long, tall, familiar. A truck cab, parked half a block away. I dropped the curtain and backed away, heart punching against my ribs. My breath turned thin and fast. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I sat in the corner of my room until dawn, knees to my chest, staring at the doorknob. At breakfast, I tried to act normal. Jamie joked about cereal. Our foster mom asked about homework. The sun felt too bright, too warm, like it was lying. After school, I walked instead of riding the bus, taking the long route, scanning every street behind me. Twice I swore I saw a blue cab in the distance, but each time it disappeared behind traffic. By the time I got home, I had made up my mind. I couldn't handle this alone. I had to tell someone. I went to Jamie's room, shutting the door behind me. "I think Dad's here," I whispered. His face went pale. I told him everything. The truck, the package, the nights. the gearshift knob. His hands curled into fists. "We have to tell them," he said. "We have to tell the foster parents." "Or the cops," I nodded. Finally a plan, but we waited too long. That night, as rain pattered against the windows, there was a sound at 2:14 a.m. Not tapping, not footsteps, a metallic clink. From the driveway, my blood turned to ice. I shook Jamie awake and we crept to the front window together. We didn't pull the curtain, just lifted the edge an inch. His truck filled the driveway. Blue. Mud splattered. Engine idling like a growl. The chrome grille reflected the porch light. I covered my mouth to stop a sound from escaping. Jamie stared, breathing fast. "We have to wake them up," he whispered. Now. We ran to our foster parents' room and shook them, begging them to listen. At first they were confused, half asleep. Then something happened that I will never forget. A shadow moved past their bedroom window. Slow, deliberate, too tall to be anyone but him. Our foster dad bolted up and grabbed the phone to call the police. Our foster mom locked our bedroom door and pushed Jamie and me behind her. I could hear my pulse in my ears. Outside, Boots walked across gravel, then up the wooden porch steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. The boards creaked under his weight. Then, silence. Our foster mom pressed a finger to her lips. We held our breath. Then the doorknob rattled. Once, then again, then violently. Our foster dad shouted that the police were on their way. A man's voice replied through the door, low and calm. The same voice that haunted every nightmare I've ever had. "You can't hide my children from me." Jamie squeezed my hand so tight it hurt. I shook uncontrollably, my teeth chattering. Then came a loud bang as something slammed against the door. Our foster mom screamed. Our foster dad yelled through the phone. Another bang, harder. The frame splintered, but then sirens, distant but growing. The banging stopped. We heard steps retreat, the hiss of air brakes, an engine revving. By the time police lights washed over the house in flashing red and blue, the truck was gone. We gave statements. Officers searched. They were kind, but their eyes said everything. A ghost is hard to catch. We stayed at a hotel that night. Social workers talked about moving us again, farther this time. New names, new schools, new lives. I nodded at everything, but inside I felt hollow. Running again. Always running, now it's been 3 days. They say we're safe for now, that he probably fled the state, that patrol cars will keep watch. But I don't believe distance can stop a man like my father. He doesn't love us, he owns us. In his mind, we are cargo he lost along a route he intends to finish. Earlier tonight, at the hotel, I woke to a sound, a hiss, air brakes. Very close. I went to the window, no truck in sight, just darkness. But the sound was real. I know the rhythm of it. I know it like a heartbeat. Jamie is sleeping. The foster parents are asleep in the next room. The hallway is quiet. My hands are shaking as I write this, and I keep checking the door, waiting for a shadow under the frame. What scares me most isn't that he might break in. It's that I don't think he'll need to, because no matter how far we run, he's already inside my head. Every echo, every engine, every night sky reminds me that highways never end. And men like my father don't stop. They hunt. And I'm starting to think the road never really let him go. It just sent him back for us. I have feared heights for as long as I can remember, but nothing prepared me for the way apartment 13B made that fear feel alive, like it had teeth. My name is Melanie Cross, and I still remember the first night the wind screamed against those glass walls, rattling the window panes like something was trying to claw its way in. I was 8 years old. Barefoot on polished floors I was too scared to walk across, staring at a city that looked like it wanted to swallow me whole. From the very beginning, that place felt wrong. The building was called Overlook Towers, a needle of chrome and glass in downtown Chicago, where the wind never stopped moving, and the shadows looked longer from above. My parents bragged about the view to everyone. Top floor, 13th story, corner unit. You can see the whole world from up there. They smiled when they said it. I shook when I heard it. They thought fear built character. They thought children were clay. And they meant to shape us. My little brother Eli was 5 then. He clung to me constantly. Tiny fingers curled into my shirt. eyes wide and unblinking whenever we stepped too close to the windows. My dad would pry him off and laugh. "You kids need thicker skin. The world's brutal. Fear is weakness. We're going to fix that." My mother didn't laugh. She just nodded like she'd already forgotten what it felt like to be small. It started with exercises. That was their word, exercises. Like we were pets or projects, not children. We had to stand at the window for 5 minutes, then 10, then 15, while the building swayed ever so slightly in the wind. The sway you don't notice when you're older unless you already know to feel for it. But I noticed. I felt every inch of it in my bones, like the floor might drop away at any second. Stop crying. Hold still. Look down. Those were the commands. I obeyed. Eli didn't, and he paid for it. Our balcony was made of glass panels bolted into steel framing, and the first time Dad dragged Eli onto it, the wind was howling so loudly I could barely hear my brother's screams. I remember pressing my palms to my ears. I remember wishing for a storm so strong it would break the rail, just so it would all end and we'd never have to go out there again. One night, when the city lights flickered in the fog, my father turned off all the lamps and pulled the blinds open wide. "Tonight's lesson is control," he said. "Fear is just bad breathing. Conquer your lungs, conquer your mind." He opened the balcony door, letting in a blast of cold air that smelled like rain and metal. I felt the floor move. The wind roared. And that was the night the nightmares began. Dreams of falling, of spinning through black air, of my own voice swallowed by the dark before I hit the street below. Every time I woke up from those dreams, my father was there. Standing in the doorway, just watching, his voice a whisper. "It's only scary if you look down." Eli stopped speaking that year. Literally stopped. Silence became his only defense. My parents celebrated that too. "See? He's learning discipline." We grew up like that. Me forcing myself to stare through glass. Eli shrinking into himself. The world below us always waiting. By the time Eli turned 13, I thought maybe things were getting better. Fewer exercises. Fewer lectures about strength. We even laughed sometimes quietly in our room with the doors closed. We made plans. We talked about leaving the moment we turned 18. Finding a ground floor apartment somewhere warm, where the earth didn't move and wind didn't scream. But our parents weren't done. Their final lesson began on the coldest night of winter. I remember waking in the dark to a loud click. I sat up, heart racing, and tried to open my bedroom door. It wouldn't budge, locked, bolted from the outside. I banged on it and called for my mom. No answer. Then I saw it. The balcony door in my room was cracked open, letting in freezing air that whipped the curtains like frantic ghosts. A piece of paper was taped to the glass, flapping violently in the wind. 4 words written in my father's heavy hand. "Face it or fall forever." I ran to Eli's room. He was already on his balcony, curled up, sobbing, arms around his knees. The wind was so loud I could barely hear my own voice shouting his name. The building swayed harder than I'd ever felt. The glass panels rattled. Far below, the streets were glossy with ice. I pounded on my door again and again until my fists ached. We were trapped. The balcony rail shook under each gust, making a hollow metallic groan that vibrated in my skull. Eli crawled toward me, inch by inch, his lips blue, his small body shaking. I reached through the gap between our balconies, stretching my arm as far as I could. "Don't move. Stay low, stay low," I screamed. He reached back. Our fingertips barely touched. Then came the worst sound I've ever heard. A grinding, popping shriek of stressed metal, followed by a sharp crack. The railing at the far end of Eli's balcony had torn loose. It bowed outward, trembling, one bolt already gone. One gust away from breaking free entirely. Eli screamed, but no words came out. Only that strangled, breathless panic I knew too well. I had one choice: cross onto his balcony or watch him die. I stepped through the freezing dark barefoot, gripping the slick floor with my toes. Every muscle in my body shook. The wind shoved me sideways. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then I crawled, forcing myself forward inch by inch. When I finally reached him, I wrapped my arms around his shoulders and held on with everything I had. "I've got you," I whispered. Even though we both knew I might not, that was when the door behind us opened. My parents stood there, calm, blank, evaluating us like subjects in an experiment. "You're disappointing," my mother said. "We thought you'd do better," my father added, something Inside me snapped. A lifetime of fear surged into something hotter. Rage, the kind that burns clean and bright. I pulled Eli inside, shoved him toward my room, and spun back to face our parents. My father stepped forward, hand raised to grab me. I shoved him first. He stumbled. Surprised. Off balance. And in one motion I didn't plan, didn't think through, didn't even believe was mine. I pushed him out onto the balcony he had used as a weapon against us. He fell to his knees, catching himself on the broken railing, gripping the loose panel that swayed under his weight. My mother gasped. I slammed the balcony door and locked it. For the first time in my life, they were the ones on the wrong side of the glass, hands shaking. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. By the time the locks were broken and police filled the apartment, I was no longer a terrified child. I was something else. Something awake. They took my parents away that night. Eli and I left that building and swore we would never look back. But trauma doesn't end when the door closes. It follows. We moved in with our mother's cousin, Aunt Renee, in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Evanston. A small one-story home with creaking floors and thick curtains and windows that didn't show the world falling away beneath you. At first, the normalcy felt unreal. I slept with my shoes on, waiting for footsteps. Eli refused to sleep near any window at all. Aunt Renee tried. She baked. She bought board games. She spoke gently. But she didn't understand what the 13th floor had done to us. The nightmares came back first. Wind in the walls. Screams swallowed by distance. The dizzying tilt of a swaying building. I'd wake up sweating, gripping the sheets, certain I was falling. Eli had it worse. Some mornings he wouldn't speak at all. Some nights he'd sleepwalk, standing in the hallway facing the front door like he was waiting for someone. One evening after he'd gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea staring at nothing. Aunt Renee rested a hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now," she said. But safety is a feeling, not a fact, and feelings don't come when you call them. Weeks passed. Eli started therapy. I enrolled in community college. On the surface, life moved, but trauma waits for cracks to slip through. And mine came one gray afternoon in March. I was walking home from class when I passed a glass skyscraper downtown. Nothing unusual at first, just another mirrored rectangle reflecting clouds. But as I stepped beneath it, I heard a whisper. Soft, familiar, close to my ear, though no one stood beside me. "It's only scary if you look down." I froze. Cars rolled by. People passed. No one else reacted. My heart hammered so violently I thought I might faint. I hurried home, refusing to glance back. That night, I told myself it was stress. 3 days later, I heard it again, this time in a dream. But it didn't feel like a dream. I was on a balcony, not ours, but close enough, wind blasting my hair across my face, cold air burning my cheeks. I tried to step back, but the glass beneath my feet tilted downward like a slide. At the far end of the balcony stood my father. Not bruised, not broken, not furious, smiling. Face it or fall forever. I jolted awake, gasping. Eli was standing beside my bed, eyes wide, trembling. "Mel," he whispered, voice tiny. "He's coming back." My blood ran cold. "No," I said, pulling him close. "He can't hurt us now." But Eli shook his head. "Not him. The fear." I didn't know how to answer that. Days became weeks. Spring sunlight thawed the snow, but not my nerves. I avoided downtown. I avoided elevators. I avoided sleep. But trauma hunts. And eventually, it cornered me. It happened during a campus fire drill. The alarm shrieked. Students rushed down stairwells in crowded waves. I tried to stay calm. I was fine on ground floors. I was fine outside. But then someone said it. "We're evacuating from the top down." Top down. Those words punched breath from my lungs. The hallway tilted. The walls pulsed. I gripped the railing and suddenly I was back in overlooked towers, 8 years old, wind screaming, floors swaying, glass trembling. Someone touched my arm. I screamed. I don't remember collapsing. I do remember the white of the nurse's office and the humiliation of shaking uncontrollably in front of strangers. After that, I stopped going to class. I told myself I needed time, that I could heal if I just stayed still. But staying still leaves room for thoughts to grow teeth. At night, I began hearing creaks in the house, soft, rhythmic, like the sway of a distant structure. The first time it happened, I tiptoed into the hallway, expecting Eli, but he was asleep. The creaking stopped the moment I listened. When I lay back down, it resumed, night after night, louder. One evening, I snapped and shouted at the ceiling, "Stop it!" The creaking stopped. The silence was worse. I barely slept after that. When I did, the dreams changed. No balcony this time. Just darkness and wind and my father's whispering footsteps circling me. Soon I began avoiding windows entirely. Even closed curtains bothered me, the vague outline of glass behind fabric, waiting. When Aunt Renee asked if I wanted to move my bed closer to the window for fresh air, I shook so hard I dropped a mug. The fear was growing again, and then came the night that broke me. I woke at 3 a.m. to the unmistakable sound of wind, not outside, inside the room. Cold air brushed my face. I sat up, heart pounding, and saw the window swaying open, curtain billowing like a pale arm reaching inward. I stared. I had locked that window. My breath hitched. Slowly, I slid out of bed and stepped toward it on trembling legs. The curtain snapped in the gust. City lights flickered beyond the glass, dizzying and distant, like I was looking down from the 13th floor again. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I turned. No one there, but I felt it, pressure in the room like the air itself was watching me. I backed away, whispering, "You're gone. You're gone. You're gone." Then faint but clear, a whisper answered, "Look down." I slapped my hands over my ears and ran from the room, not stopping until I collapsed in the hallway. I wanted to scream for Aunt Renee, but my voice wouldn't come. My throat locked. Tears blurred everything. The next morning I lied and said the wind had unlatched the window. Aunt Renee nodded, but Eli just stared at me. He knew. We lived like that for months. Me hiding, Eli watching, the fear growing teeth again. And I realized something awful. The building was gone. My parents were gone. But the lesson remained. Fear doesn't end when you escape the place it was born. It waits inside you. And now sometimes when I walk past a tall building, I swear I see a reflection that isn't mine. A shape standing behind the glass. A whisper in the wind. And just. Last night, standing in the driveway, I looked up at the moon through a gap in the trees and felt the ground tilt beneath me. For a heartbeat, I wasn't in Evanston anymore. I was back on the balcony. The wind screamed, the glass swayed, and my father's voice, calm, patient, endless, rose beneath it all. "Don't look down." I was 9 the first time I asked about my sister, and my mother's reaction should have told me everything. Even now, at 23, I can still see the way her fingers froze on the dish towel, how my father turned sharply from his toolbox as if the word itself had claws. But back then, I was just a kid who didn't understand why a name could feel like a crime. Mara, a ghost in our house, erased so cleanly that even her memory felt forbidden. Coming back to 514 Westbrook Avenue 12 years later was supposed to be temporary, a few months to save money after my job in Omaha fell through. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself I was grown. But the moment I pulled into that cracked driveway, with the sagging porch and the dead planter boxes and the curtains drawn tight even though it was barely 6 p.m., I felt something old and unfinished coil inside my ribs. Mom rushed out to greet me, apron still on, flower on her cheek, voice bright to the point of brittle. "Hannah, sweetheart, home." Dad followed slower, his eyes scanning the street before he hugged me. He had added a third deadbolt to the front door since I'd last visited. I laughed about it. They didn't laugh back. The first night I couldn't sleep. The house creaked and sighed like it was watching. Through the vents I heard them whispering. My parents, voices sharp and hushed. "She's older now," my mother said. "Drop it." "We don't know what she remembers," my father snapped. I held my breath in bed, the darkness suddenly suffocating. I told myself I misheard, that it had nothing to do with me. But the next morning, Dad double-checked the window locks 3 times, and Mom flinched every time a car slowed on the street. The tension in that house wasn't new. I just wasn't a child anymore, so I finally noticed. On my 4th day, while cleaning the basement, I found it. The hair clip. Small. Silver. A tiny engraved M on the back. My chest tightened. My parents had told me Mara ran away at 15. I believed them. I never questioned the missing photos. Never questioned how her name vacuumed the air from any room. But touching that hair clip was different. It was real. It had weight. And it had been shoved behind a rusted pipe near a patch of mismatched concrete on the basement floor. When I came upstairs, they were at the kitchen table. Mom folding laundry, Dad oiling a hinge. I set the clip between them. "Why did you lie?" Their stillness was instant. Not shock. Not confusion, just performance, Hannah, Dad said softly. "You're tired. That clip isn't Mara's. You're mixing things up again." Again. That word rattled through me. I didn't mix anything up. I found this hidden. Why would you hide it? Mom reached for my hand. Her smile was thin like old wallpaper. "Sweetheart, you've always been imaginative. You get things turned around. Just like..." She stopped, swallowed, "just like Mara." I pulled away and went to my room, my pulse a drum. That night the whispering returned through the vents. "She's remembering." "No, she'll calm down. We can't go through this again." Again, I barely slept. In the morning, I demanded they tell me the truth. Dad's eyes hardened for the first time in years. "Your sister ran away." End of discussion. He said it with the tone of a man rehearsing a line he no longer believed. After that, they watched me. At breakfast, in hallways, every door I opened, every room I lingered in, I felt their eyes. By the 6th day, I started keeping my bedroom window cracked at night, just for the feeling of air that wasn't theirs. The storm hit on the 8th night, thunder shaking the walls, rain hammering the siding. The power flickered twice, and I heard footsteps downstairs. Voices, the basement door. Curiosity, or maybe dread, pulled me from bed. I crept halfway down the stairs and froze. Dad stood at the edge of the basement steps, holding a sledgehammer. Mom held duct tape. He whispered, "She's remembering. We have to stop it now." My mother's voice trembled. "I can't do this again, David. I can't." I stumbled backward, floorboard creaking under my heel. Their heads snapped up. "Hannah?" My mother sounded like she already knew the answer. I ran. I don't remember thinking. I remember adrenaline surging through me like fire. I tore back to the basement before they could block my path. If there was something under that concrete, I needed proof. My father shouted my name behind me, but I'd already grabbed the hammer he left on the workbench. One swing shattered the basement light. Glass rained. Darkness swallowed us all, Mom screamed. Dad lunged. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the door, and locked it. He pounded from the other side. Mom begged through tears. "Hannah, don't do this. Please, honey, just talk to us." I didn't. I called 911 with shaking hands. My voice was almost unrecognizable. "My parents are trying to hurt me. They killed my sister. She's under the basement floor. Send someone. Please." When the cruisers arrived, my father was eerily calm, hands raised, offering no resistance. Mom collapsed on the lawn, sobbing, rocking back and forth, repeating the same sentence. She wouldn't listen. She wouldn't listen. She wouldn't listen. The police found bones beneath the broken concrete. A sweater with Mara stitched inside the, collar, cloth, hair. Enough to end the mystery. But the mystery didn't end for me. It only changed shape, because now I live in this house, alone, waiting for it to stop breathing, waiting for it to stop remembering. Some nights I hear tapping from the basement as if someone wants out, and I swear when I'm half asleep and the wind presses against the windows just right, I hear my mother's voice behind me. Daughters should know when to stay buried, and that's where my real nightmare begins. After the trial, after the sentencing, after the reporters finally left our street, I told myself staying here was about closure, about control, about proving this house didn't own me. But I think in truth I stayed because trauma has gravity. It pulls you back even when every sane part of you wants to flee. I wake up most nights at 3:11 a.m., Not 3:10, not 3:12, always 3:11. I don't set an alarm. I don't have insomnia. But something merciless inside this house knows when to open my eyes. The tapping started after the funeral. One soft knock at first, then another, then three evenly spaced coming from beneath my feet. Tap, tap, tap. I tried to blame the pipes, the foundation, the storm drain. But pipes don't mimic knuckles. And pipes don't stop when you whisper, please. I avoided the basement at first. Weeks went by. I made coffee. I went to work. I tried to stitch myself into a normal life. But the house was patient. The house remembered what I tried to forget. One night I found the basement door open. Just open, I hadn't touched it. The lock was snapped clean, metal twisted like something pried it from the inside. I stood in the hallway staring at that black rectangle of stairs descending to nothing, and my skin prickled with the cold certainty that trauma isn't just emotional. Sometimes trauma has a body. Sometimes trauma walks. I bought new locks, sturdier ones. I slept with the TV on. I kept lights running at night like a cowardly lighthouse keeper on the edge of my own mind. But the house adjusted. It creaked in new patterns. It breathed through new vents. And when I drowned it in noise, it spoke through silence. The worst part wasn't the tapping. It was the whisper on the 12th night. Faint, female, younger than my mother, older than me. Hannah, not a shout, not a threat, a plea. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The voice wasn't outside. It was in the walls, in the pipes, in the foundation, in the air I breathed. I started talking back eventually like some grief-struck lunatic, whispering, "What do you want?" into corners and vents like I expected an answer. Then one night I got one. "Remember?" The word slithered down my spine. I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed of cement and fingernails and a muffled scream nobody answered. I began digging through court files, police records, anything I could request or steal copies of. My parents had confessed to burying Mara, but their story was too neat. Too linear. They claimed she was uncontrollable, that she hurt herself, that she was a danger. But the autopsy suggested blunt trauma, defensive fractures, scratches on bone as if she clawed at something in the final moments, scratched from inside a small space, like a floor, like a coffin. The nightmares bled into waking hours. I stopped seeing friends. I stopped answering calls. I stopped trusting myself around mirrors because sometimes I thought, just for a flicker, that the reflection had different eyes. Her eyes. One morning, I found dirt under my fingernails. I hadn't been outside. I checked the basement again, forcing myself down the stairs. Flashlight gripped so tight my knuckles throbbed. The patch of ground where they found Mara looked darker than the rest. Fresher, even though it had been resealed. When I knelt, the cold seemed to seep into my bones. My breath fogged. The light flickered and I heard it, faint, rhythmic, desperate, scratching, from beneath the cement. That's when I realized something awful. I had no memory of being 9 for an entire 3-month stretch of my childhood. A blackout, a gap, a hole. I asked my parents once as a teenager why I didn't remember that summer. They said kids forget things. Now I wonder what I saw, what I knew, what they did to me so I wouldn't remember. Now I wonder if Mara wasn't the only girl they tried to bury. The basement isn't quiet anymore. The tapping has rhythm, a pattern, Morse code maybe. I haven't translated it. I'm afraid of what it will spell. I hear footsteps in the hallway at night. Bare feet, light, feminine. They stop outside my door. If I breathe too loudly, the footsteps pause like they're listening back. I don't open the door. I won't, because if I do and nothing is there, that would be worse. There are days I think about leaving. I even packed a bag once, got as far as the driveway. But the house loomed behind me, and something primal in my chest whispered, "If you leave, you'll never know the truth." So I stayed. I don't know if the voice is Mara or madness. I don't know if trauma can haunt wood and wires and concrete. I don't know if I'm becoming my parents or becoming my sister, or becoming something else entirely. But I know this. Tonight the tapping stopped. Tonight. The house is too quiet, and tonight at 3:11 a.m., I woke not to a sound but to a smell. Dirt, fresh, wet, unearthed. It's coming from the hallway. I'm sitting on my bed now, writing this, listening to the floorboards bend as footsteps move closer. Slow, patient, not hiding anymore. Someone is outside my door, and I finally understand what my mother meant. Daughter should know when to stay. Buried. The footsteps stopped just inches away. The doorknob is moving. I'm not going to run. Not this time. Because maybe the truth isn't under the house. Maybe it's what the house has been waiting to let out. I don't think I ever had a childhood, just training. My name is Lydia Rhodes. I'm 20 years old. And sometimes when I try to remember something innocent like a birthday candle or a messy sleepover or laughing so hard my ribs hurt, there's nothing there. Just commands, drills, corrections. My parents always said we were not like other families, and I was too young to realize that was a threat, not a point of pride. Childhood is supposed to smell like sunscreen and crayons. Mine smelled like gun oil, bleach, and the rubber tang of latex gloves. We lived in a 2-story house outside Savannah, Georgia, on a quiet street lined with trees that swayed like watchers. My father treated our home like a bunker. Locks on every door, alarms on every window, cameras tucked into the corners like spiders. He used words like protocol and loyalty the way normal parents said homework and bedtime. And my mother, God, my mother, she was worse in her quiet way. If he was the hammer, she was the blueprint, always planning, always listening, always tightening the screws of our world. By age 10, I could disassemble and reassemble a handgun in under a minute. I could withstand pepper spray without screaming. I could lie while smiling. But I didn't know how to braid hair. I didn't know how to make a friend. I didn't even know how to laugh without asking permission. My younger sister, Natalie, soft-voiced and breakable, always struggled more than I did. She didn't have the stomach for obedience. And in my house, anything less than obedience was treason. My father filmed all our drills, stacking the tapes in labeled bins. Week 14, Lydia, interrogation practice. Week 27, Natalie, pain tolerance. Sometimes late at night, I'd lie awake listening to my parents rewatch the footage downstairs, pausing, rewinding, judging.
Natalie hesitates, my mother would say.
Weak, my father would respond. And then, inevitably, came the punishments. It always happened in the basement. That basement. Even now, if I close my eyes, I can smell it. Damp concrete, cold metal chains, and something faintly rotten that never went away. The stairs creaked with a long, wounded groan as if begging us not to come down. At the bottom was a support beam with 2 iron rings drilled into it, and Natalie's wrists were dragged there more times than I can count. I used to press my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. Her screams traveled through the vents. They slithered into my dreams. The worst night was when Natalie was 16. She came to my room, trembling, her voice barely a breath. "Lydia, please," she whispered. "I want to leave." A real school, real friends, a real life. Her eyes looked like shattered glass. I should have said yes. I should have run with her. But survival was a cage I didn't know how to unlock. I told her to go back to sleep. And I've hated myself every day since. Our parents found her attempt the next night. She'd packed a tiny backpack and written a note. That was all the proof they needed. Traitor, betrayer, disappointment. They dragged her to the basement while I stood in the hallway, shaking so violently I could barely breathe. My father pointed at me. "Stand at attention," he ordered. "You will witness the cost of disobedience." Natalie screamed my name until her voice broke. I stared at the floor, jaw clenched, watching my tears splatter onto my bare feet. My mother's voice was cold enough to burn. "You watch, Lydia," she said, "so you never betray us too." I made myself numb. I made myself stone. I told myself it was the only way to survive. The next morning, Natalie was gone. My parents claimed she ran away in the night, but her shoes were still by the door, neatly paired, as if waiting for her. My mother made pancakes, humming like nothing had happened. My father patted my shoulder and said, "She chose weak. Weak doesn't deserve to stay." I nodded like a good daughter, but something broke inside me. From that day on, I obeyed, but it was a mask. I pretended. I smiled, I saluted, and I waited. Soon after, they got careless. Maybe they believed the basement had finally silenced me. Maybe they thought I was theirs forever. But one night, one glorious, catastrophic night, they forgot to lock my bedroom door. They went to bed early after a training session, exhausted, confident. The house was quiet. the cameras blinking their red eyes. I slipped out, heart jackhammering, feet silent on the hall floor. Down the stairs. Through the kitchen. Past the locked basement door I refused to open. I didn't have to see what was under that tarp to know. I found the matches in the junk drawer. When the flames rose, I felt nothing. No fear, no triumph, just silence. I walked barefoot down the driveway as the house lit the sky. My parents never made it out. The fire chief called it an accident. The police shrugged. I didn't correct them. How could I? I told them I'd been out on a midnight walk. They believed me. After all, I knew how to lie with a straight spine and wet eyes. My parents had trained me well. I moved into a tiny apartment above an old barbershop on River Street, 3 blocks from the water. The first night alone, I thought I'd feel free. Instead, I felt untethered, floating, wrong. Freedom is terrifying when you've never had it. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow felt like surveillance. I triple-checked my locks, then triple-checked again. Sleep didn't come. When it finally did, it was full of chains and vents and Natalie's voice shrieking my name. The dreams would have been bad enough, but then the noises started. At first it was soft, a rattle under the floorboards like metal brushing wood. I told myself old buildings make old noises. I ignored it. Then objects began shifting. My keys moved from the counter to the table. A glass I hadn't touched was waiting in the sink. One morning, all the closet hangers were turned backward. I tried to laugh it off. New environment, Lydia, stop being paranoid. But on the 7th night, I woke to the unmistakable sound of a chain dragging across wood. Not just a sound, a direction. Under me, under the floor. I sat up, drenched in sweat, clutching the blanket. The apartment was dark. Only the streetlight through the blinds drew thin bars of light across the floor. My heart battered my ribs. The chain sound stopped. Then, a voice, faint, wet, close. Why didn't you save me? I froze, my lungs forgot how to work. I waited for the voice again, but the silence that followed was worse. I barely slept at all after that, and in the morning I found muddy footprints by my bed, bare, small, like hers. I scrubbed the floor until my hands throbbed, but it didn't erase the terror. I kept telling myself there had to be a rational explanation. Sleepwalking, a dream I'd mistaken for sound. Maybe the footprints weren't muddy. Maybe I'd spilled something. Maybe. But denial is a thin blanket. It never keeps you warm for long. 2 days later, I bought a cheap toolkit and pried up a section of the floorboard near the corner where I'd heard the chain. There was nothing underneath except darkness, dust, and the hollow guts of the building. No chains, no footprints, no proof of anything. I stared into that empty space for a long time, feeling stupid, feeling insane. Maybe I was insane. Trauma does that. Guilt does that. I told myself to stop digging, physically and mentally. For a little while it worked. I got a job waitressing at a diner by the water. I smiled at tourists. I learned how to make small talk. I bought a plant. I even tried laughing, even if it felt unfamiliar in my mouth. Maybe this was healing. Maybe I could build something normal on top of the ruins. That hope lasted 12 days. On the 13th night, the wall monitor in my apartment, the one the landlord installed for smoke and motion detection, turned on by itself. A red light blinked. Recording. I hadn't moved. No windows were open. No alarms tripped. I stared at the glowing screen, bile burning my throat. Then I saw it. A shadow in the hallway behind me, faint but human-shaped, standing so still it barely seemed to breathe. I spun around. Nothing. But when I looked back at the monitor, the shadow was closer. I unplugged it. I almost smashed it. I sat on the kitchen floor until sunrise, gripping a knife like a lifeline. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. All day at work, I moved like a ghost. My manager snapped her fingers in front of my face twice. I smiled, lied, said I was fine. That night I dreamed of the basement again. Same cold air, same concrete, same support beam. Only this time, I stood before the tarp. My dream self reached for it. I didn't want to. I begged myself not to. But my hands pulled it back anyway, and I woke screaming, my throat raw, sweat chilling my skin. A whisper lingered in my ear like breath against my neck. Why didn't you save me? I turned every light on in the apartment, pacing until dawn, unable to sit, unable to breathe. I told myself it was guilt, just guilt, trauma echoing. Brains replay what they can't accept. Right? Then the phone rang. Not my cell, the apartment landline. The dusty, unused one mounted in the kitchen that I never even plugged in. It rang again. I stared at it, heart in my mouth, and on the fourth ring I lifted the receiver with a trembling hand. Silence. Then a click. Then a whisper, soft as a dying breath. Lydia. I dropped the phone. It hit the wall and swung on its cord. I backed into the counter, shaking so hard my teeth knocked. I knew that voice. Even distorted by static, even warped by memory, I knew. Natalie. That was the moment I stopped pretending I could outrun any of it. The next day I bought a crowbar, duct tape, and a flashlight. If something was under my floor, whether real, imagined, or metaphorical, I was done letting it own me. Maybe I needed proof to exercise it. Maybe I needed to face the rot at the root. Maybe part of me even believed I deserved whatever I found. At midnight, I pried up 3 full planks of flooring. Beneath the wood was a cavity, and in that cavity, a metal hook was bolted into the beam. Attached to the hook was a length of old chain. My stomach turned to ice. I stumbled back, breath stuttering. It wasn't possible. This building was 100 years old. My parents had never been here. There was no logical line between then and now. And yet the chain sat there, mute and undeniable, exactly like the ones in our basement. I crawled forward again, shining the beam along the chain, and froze when it illuminated fingernail scratches gouged into the wood. Tiny, desperate, just like hers. A sound rose from the dark. Not a voice. A sob. I slammed the boards back down, heart detonating in my chest. I duct taped every seam, then duct taped over the duct tape, hands frantic and clumsy. I could still hear it, sobbing, scraping, pleading. I fled to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat in the tub with my knees to my chest until morning. I didn't go to work. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the floor, waiting for the next sound, waiting for the next whisper, waiting for the next proof that either I was being haunted or I had never truly escaped. As dusk fell, exhaustion finally dragged me into a half-sleep on the couch. That's when I felt the breath on my ear. Warm, close, human. I didn't move. Couldn't. My whole body seized, paralyzed by a terror so complete it felt like drowning. The whisper slid into me, soft and ruined and familiar. You left me. I turned. Natalie stood over me. Her face was half shadow, half pale, her eyes dark pools of accusation. Not bloody, not monstrous. Worse. She looked exactly as she did the year she died, only hollowed out, like someone had scooped the life from behind her eyes. She reached for me with trembling fingers. I tried, I choked. I swear, Nat, I tried. Her lips parted. No, she whispered. You watched. Tears blurred everything. I shook my head over and over. I can make it right, I begged. Just tell me how, please. Tell me what to do. She tilted her head, bird-like. Then she leaned so close her forehead touched mine. Come back. I don't understand. Her voice dropped to a breath. Come back to the basement. I blinked, and she was gone. The apartment fell silent. I sat there sobbing, fists in my hair, rocking like a child, because I finally understood the truth I'd been running from. I didn't escape the basement. I brought it with me. It lives under my feet, in my walls, in my reflection, in my blood. And no matter how far I go, no matter what city I choose, no matter how many flames I light, there is no door that leads outside it. There is no world beyond its concrete and chains. There never was. It's almost morning now. I'm writing this on the cold floor, right above the boards I taped shut. The chain is rattling again. Soft, patient, hungry. Natalie is calling. And this time, I think I'm going to answer.